Okay, this is the Zoneomics webinar series where we're shining a spotlight on the founders, builders, and innovators shaping the next generation of real estate intelligence tools. I'm Matthew Player, founder and CEO of Zoneomics. The goal of the series is pretty simple: to show the industry what's possible when you combine standardized zoning data and APIs with amazing AI native tools, platforms, and applications. Today, I have with me Joe, one of the founders of Algoma. Algoma is helping real estate teams analyze deals faster than a broker call, turning an address into a complete development feasibility in minutes. And they're one of the best examples of what's possible when zoning data stops being a bottleneck and becomes a catalyst for execution. So we have Joe with me, and I want to welcome you, Joe.
Hey Matthew, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I know the office is in New York. Are you in New York today?
We are based in Dumbo in Brooklyn. So
Fantastic.
I'm here today. Where are you today?
I'm at our office in Boca Raton, Florida, and we obviously have a team out in New York too. So, and I know our teams have been connecting a lot. Got the pleasure of catching up with Michael and Safe at CRE Tech.
Awesome.
That was great. And so we have a team in New York, and obviously our office is down here in Boca. To get started, I want to kind of start with the origin, and what was the problem you and the team were obsessed with that led you to create Algoma?
Yeah, so we've come from the architecture, engineering, construction industry. A big part of our team has only sort of worked in that industry their whole career. It's a problem that we see across the globe, which is big housing shortages. And a lot of that comes down to how slow and cumbersome and expensive it is to get a project through pre-construction. Our goal was to target the first part of that process, the feasibility process, and take what is often hundreds of hours of manual work and compress that down using AI, other data tools to significantly speed up and lower the cost of that process. We partner with real estate developers, both multifamily and single family home developers, and they use our platform to evaluate new sites and to see whether they stack up financially or not.
Now, I got my own personal demo from you guys at CRE Tech just recently and loved it. Was very impressed from what I created Zoneomics for and what you guys have kind of built with it. For someone who hasn't had the privilege of their own personal demo from the founders yet, what does your product do today?
Yeah, so a developer comes to the platform, can essentially analyze any parcel in the US. So they can start with an address, latitude, longitude, a parcel ID, use that to take that site through the platform. And it starts with a site overview, all of the site information around ownership, the size of the site, the boundaries. We pull in with our partner Zoneomics, all of the zoning information. That really provides the foundation for a site because, as you well know, anything that then gets built or developed on that site is governed by those zoning restrictions. So we take those zoning restrictions, combine them with other data on the area, rents, unit sizes, unit mixes, and then allow developers to create different building design options within those constraints to see, what's going to make sense, what's going to work financially, what's going to make their pro forma stack up.
I mean, I know personally because my former life as an urban planner, I was kind of one of those consultants that would be drawn upon by a developer to do that kind of manually for them. For our audience, what sort of time and hours are you guys kind of reducing and taking out of the equation? I think the other advantage of this is quickly ruling out sites that
Right.
that aren't viable. Just as much time is spent on that and wasted on that because you have to do the same process, at least the manual process. So if you can get to a quicker no, that also is just as important as getting this automation to a yes as well.
Typical developer might look at 40 to 50 sites just for one to go forward. Some developers, it will be hundreds just for one to go forward.
Yep.
And exactly to say you're doing this work for all of those sites, and most of that work is wasted. If you were going to do this whole process manually, just take like the zoning, which you guys
Yep.
take care of, like pouring through these incredibly dense, long, complex zoning codes. The exact restrictions for the site is like a huge process. Then you've got to go find out like rent, sales prices in the area. You've got to find construction costs. You probably have to hire an architect to start doing massing, design
Yep.
options. All of this just takes weeks and weeks of work, and can cost, tens of thousands of dollars, even on those sites that aren't going to go forward.
That doesn't really even make sense now when you've got a product like this available for large players, but it's very prohibitive for your small to medium-sized real estate developers as well. And this kind of maybe levels the playing field a little bit.
Exactly as you say, like some of those massive national developers, they can kind of brute force manually do the process. They'll have big central internal teams that can kind of like take care of some of these things. It's still going to take a long time. It's still like a not a fun job for someone to do it, but they can kind of like get through it. The small guys, the local developers who are, building crucial homes in their area, in their like focus area. Often they're relying on favors,
Yep.
subconsultants. It's expensive, it's slow, it depends on all the other work that's going on in the town. It can be like a incredibly like frustrating and slow and expensive process.
And then bring it back to what you said at the beginning, just making housing supply more available, like all these friction points. Imagine what that's doing to that bottleneck of
Right.
supply and cost, basically, for the overall economy and housing supply.
The estimates vary, but the US needs somewhere between 3 and 5 million homes just to meet the current demand. So, there is a massive need for the supply of housing, and all of these friction points and sort of black boxes just stop people being able to develop that housing, either putting off projects altogether or mean a developer can do, maybe one project a year where with the right tooling and the right efficiency, they might be able to do four or five. So all of these things have like massive knock-on effects to the overall supply of housing in the US.
When you guys are having conversations with developers, what are they saying are their sort of biggest pain points with this part of the process? The zoning says we can do what we want to do here, but should we even be doing it here because the market telling us we should be here?
You say zoning is always a sort of massive, slow pain point traditionally. And then being able to try out lots of different scenarios on a site is also a pain point, right? Because if you're creating everything manually, then each scenario can take like a week's work or 2 weeks. So it gets to a point where you're just like, we need to get the project moving. We can't like look at more scenarios. So the ability to be able to run like lots of scenarios on a particular piece of land is very important. And then, yeah, construction costs is always a difficult problem.
Yep.
And always hard to get up-to-date information and match it to kind of like what you're trying to build.
And that scenario thing is not such a small thing. It's a huge thing in terms of being able to run multiple different scenarios at scale quickly. That is a game changer in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's always lots of different ways, and it might be that only one way actually works.
Yep.
You want to change like your unit mix, you want to try like different uses, you want to try different types of buildings. Like all of these things fundamentally make a big difference to the viability of the project.
And as you said, that can be that subtle difference between a certain mix or scenario can be whether you can pen a deal or not. When you guys started building Algoma, what surprised you? Obviously, we're both got accents. What surprised you when looking at the US in particular with zoning complexity and the state of zoning in the US market when you started building Algoma?
It's interesting. So I'm from the UK originally. And actually it's a very different system when you're going to build a new building. Every building is you apply with what you want to do, and you get some credit for like the buildings that are around it to be like similar to that. But actually every single new building is a totally new application. There is no zoning. Like there are no limits that are automatically set to different parcels. Even that it was quite a different
Right.
system from what I'm used to when I came to the US. And you have what sounds like, oh, a reasonably like straightforward system, right? There's a set of rules, there's a set of numbers that are associated with each parcel, and you have like a right to do exactly what those rules are. But then, of course, you go the next level down, you dig a bit deeper, and you see every single like city, town, county has a totally different set of these rules written in a totally different way and updated, weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on the jurisdiction. So that you immediately see like how complex that problem is of zoning in the US, the fact that it's not standardized, the fact that it's written in these like, sometimes literally physical documents that you have to get hold of. It's just it's a very different system. That information is vitally important. As I said before, that the zoning data of a site sets the foundation that then all of the other analysis is built on top of.
Where we do have prescriptive zoning in the Australian market, where I grew up in Sydney and started as an urban planner. The big difference we had was it's sort of more of a top-down approach where there's a template of how you write a zoning code.
Right.
They obviously can pick where the zones are and which zones they want to use, but there's only a certain amount of zones. There's a prescriptive way of how you write a template. So there's a little bit more of what you seem would make sense is that, okay, I'm going into a different municipality, but I know where the rules and how to navigate that. Whereas in the US, the city can just write it however they want, whatever structure, and there's all sorts of different formats. And that's obviously something that we've had to tackle at Zoneomics with great joy, and also had to build things to be able to navigate that crazy system and structure, and to create some sort of standardized sanity when our partners and builders come in and they want to build a solution that needs a zoning element to it, basically.
Are you able to expand a bit more about how you guys have gone about like collecting that data and structuring it and providing this kind of like API that we and others use?
In the very beginning was like, this isn't a task that could be manually done, or we couldn't just do it with brute force. In the early days, there was an element of that. I mean, that's what a scrappy startup does, and why there was an opportunity for us, because I think a lot of the bigger players that were existing in data were like, it's just too hard basket and it's never going to change. From the beginning, my co-founder Sim and I were like, AI is the solution. We had to build our own models and structures in order to do that. And one, it's a capturing problem. It's obviously expanded into other land restriction and land entitlement related data that we offer now, but obviously the zoning problem, just looking at that. Capture task of two core documents, the zoning code itself or ordinance and the zoning map. And sometimes they can be in very different formats depending on how big or large and how big of a budget that municipality has. And then there's a standardization element. So that was the core kind of eureka moment. It's like, okay, yeah, they're all writing it different ways, but you as a real estate professional, investor, or someone building a tool or an application or software, what is core about these zoning tools that people are that cities are using to control land use and density and design? What is universal about each individual tool, and then create some sort of standardization element while also keeping that local context. That was sort of where we were able to come up with a structure. Everyone needs zoning, but they need it for different ways. Renewable energy needs this bit of information. Someone that does billboard signage needs this part of the information. A company that does short-term rental needs this part of the information. And so the other part was our business model was, well, we want to make this foundational data available and then partner with other great companies that are building specific tools for that end user. And so they can take it to that end user, like yourselves are taking it to that real estate developer, that real estate broker, to give them that, feasibility or due diligence element. And so that was another part of the core part, was obviously the model that we created to disseminate this information, because we knew that we'd be forever building apps if we tried to kind of do it ourselves. That's the great partnership and has allowed us to really focus on what we nerd out about, which is zoning and that complex problems. That was key as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of other data sets are you guys thinking about in the future? You obviously already provide like a lot of zoning and parking information Are there other data sets you're thinking about, including in the future?
We obviously have announced future land use maps. Cities like New York, it's a little bit different, but in a large part of the US, which, as you mentioned, is the UK example, is whether or not you can even change that zoning to something else in the future. And we found out a couple of years ago, a thing called future land use maps, and they've got different names in the general plan or a housing element. And that is usually the determining factor of where a property can be changed from, say, it's agricultural land. Is it going to ever become a new housing site? That is sitting in the future land use map. So it made sense to us. It was very complementary to our data set. It was living in a very similar format. It was fragmented all over the place and wasn't serviced and available. And so we now have an API and the data solution. A lot of the attributes mirror, because it'll even say sometimes whether or not your height could increase or the density can increase, and matches a lot of our zoning attributes. So we now have future land use maps. The other thing that we had been working on for a while is, obviously there's a great thing is that we have this data layer available of zoning. And I think what you guys will see, particularly in very large cities, is that zoning is quite conditional. Things like parking and what have you. Yes, you want this set number. Hey, what is the height limit for this type of zone? And it's obviously conditional in many municipalities, depending on whether you're a corner site or you're an interior site, or whether or not you're doing this particular use or this particular use or a mix of uses. The controls can be actually dynamic. We've been working very hard because we want to make sure Algoma and companies like that can come in and go, all right, we can offer the exact solution for the scenario that you're building. We've come up with what we call Bassett AI and our GDE API. It's a model, not just a data set, and it allows you to interact, talk to it to get the exact solutions. Here's the site, here's the scenario, here's what we're looking at. What's the height limit that applies in this scenario? Right. And that's the thing that we're most excited about. Later that we announced at CRE Tech, and we've got a lot of our partners already experimenting with, and I think what they will be able to build with that, particularly with envelope and generative design, I think that's where we can see real innovation in that space.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super exciting. The future land use plans are very important for our customer set of like developers and multifamily and single family. Everyone wants to know, okay, this is the base zoning, but what could it be? Is it worth me going in, talking to the city? Is there a route where I could get this upzoned, have a taller building, switch it to a different use, potentially office to residential? So that information is really key to that client set.
Yeah, and that's sometimes how in certain markets, that's the only way you can get the value creation there, taking that planning risk, but knowing that, okay, yes, there's a path here. And that's key about having that future land use data. We're both very passionate, so we can probably stick and sit there for a while. And I think we'll have to do that over a coffee or a beer at the next conference that we catch up on. What are customers doing with Algoma today that excites you, knowing that marked difference in their previous workflows or how they currently solved it?
Yeah, so right now Algoma is kind of that first look for a developer at that site, rather than them doing their traditional desktop research and then hiring like a few sub-consultants to start doing that work to do that feasibility. We're their kind of like first port of call. They can start with that address, run the site through the analysis, and get pretty far into the process. Definitely enough into it to say, yes, this is a site that makes sense to go forward, or no, I can eliminate that site. Where we're providing a lot of value for developers is allowing them to know where they need to focus their time, eliminating quickly the sites that aren't going to work, and really showing the potential of sites that can go forward and are going to work.
And I think maybe it comes back to this inherent problem I've seen in markets like Australia and maybe in the UK, where some of this has been available to developers, and the transition that maybe is having in housing supply. There hasn't been anything out there like this in the US market.
It's a series of things that are now available. Right now, we have good quality zoning data in a format that apps can consume, and we're able to build, as you said, generative design and parametric design options on top. It gives developers tools in their hands that are easy to use, that allows them to run these workflows that there just wasn't another option for before.
How do you see AI and Algoma reshaping this real estate sort of pre-development workflow or stack where do you see things over the next 5 years?
Our vision has always been to speed up and lower the cost of housing delivery. We will target anything in a developer's workflow that we can see we can significantly speed up and lower their cost. And right now there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit to go after in that initial feasibility stage, but we want to allow developers to significantly lower the cost of housing and in the process increase the overall supply of housing across the US.
And I can see you guys, it's an easy, like, okay, I've got my site that I've found with Algoma and I've done my scenario. And then there's that whole entitlement stage that's obviously ripe for disruption as well, and a massive pain point. It'll be exciting to see what you guys build there, and hopefully we can continue to build some great data sets that allow you to kind of build some amazing things for them in that process. And just wrapping up, for me as an urban planner by training, real estate development, starts with zoning. And when zoning information sort of become structured, machine readable, and instantly accessible, it doesn't just speed up feasibility, it can transform what teams are able to build, how fast they can evaluate deals, and the number of opportunities that they can pursue, which Algoma does. For me, Algoma, when I got that demonstration from the team, is one of the clearest examples of this shift. We're proud to play a small role in supporting your mission of making that feasibility faster than making that call or doing that brute force manually. Our audience, if you want to explore how zoning automation can compress your due diligence timeline from weeks to minutes to seconds, reach out to the team at Algoma and Joe and Michael and Safe there. I'm a big fan. Looking forward to seeing what you guys continue to build out there. And I really appreciate you making the time to join us, educate the audience, tell us a bit about what you guys are building there.
Well, really appreciate it, Matthew, and thank you for having us on. We're excited and lucky to partner with firms like Zoneomics, and so long may it continue.